Hello and welcome to Behind the Music, where we take an inside look at the music you'll hear on North Carolina Symphony programs. I'm Michelle Di Russo, Assistant Conductor of the North Carolina Symphony. This weekend, the Symphony will perform a fascinating program conducted by Timothy Myers, featuring Rachmaninoff's Second Symphony, Arvo Pärt's Tabula Rasa, and Cross Currents, written by the North Carolina Symphony's composer-in-residence, Anthony Kelly. The first piece on the program is Anthony Kelly's Cross Currents, a scherzo with trio for string orchestra, a piece written by our composer-in-residence in 1990. This piece is written for strings only and as a standalone piece that incorporates and acknowledges the contributions of Black American music, for example, jazz, blues, and rap, to the American musical style. By representing the often neglected voices of the classical concert hall, Anthony Kelly hopes to open doors for more diverse audiences and bring them into our concert hall. He achieves this by exposing the Western European-centric attitudes of classical music and by elevating the American voice in art music. This piece focuses on crossing the imaginary, arbitrary lines that have been created by society between art and pop, between European and American, and between Black and white. He specifically chose to use a string orchestra, an instrumental combination that comes from European tradition and include many musical techniques that defy such heritage, such as syncopated rhythms, jazzy harmonies, extensions in the standard instrumental ranges, and percussive effects. In spite of the diversity that can be found in these elements, he achieves unity through the use of two main motifs: an opening 4-note chord and 3 notes that can be heard in the bass at the beginning of the trio. The outer sections of the piece will be more robust, physical, and dance-like, and the inner part more intricate and intimate, like a walk through the woods. The opening and closing sections are characterized by rapid urban pulses that take moments to joke around with cross rhythms and busy bebop gestures. The scherzo naturally has an element of humor which comes historically from the classical minuet and the use of very fast tempos. Scherzo means to joke in Italian. As we move on to the trio or middle section, the character will be more relaxed, organic, and bucolic. The composer considers this section the heart of the piece and employs an accompaniment that is a quasi-rap rhythm, a transformed version from an early 90s rap by Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. Why not incorporate some rap in the classical world when rappers have been including pop and classical tunes in their mixes? In Anthony Kelly's music, we will clearly hear the powerful stylistic influences of Franz Liszt and his Mephisto waltzes, Bartók and Stravinsky, 3 international composers that occasionally played around between popular and classical styles. We will also hear influences of Ahmad Jamal, Thelonious Monk, and Duke Ellington. As the title states, Kelly will find a way to make these contrasting influences live together in unity in this piece. Next, we will be playing a piece that became a turning point in Arvo Pärt's career. This is Tabula Rasa, a double concerto featuring players from our own orchestra: Karen Streetmatter Galvin, Assistant Concertmaster, and Jacqueline Saed Wilworski, Principal Second, both on violin. Written in 1977 for 2 violins, string orchestra, and prepared piano, this work was composed at the request of the violinist Gideon Kremer. When we talk about a prepared piano, this means that the piano will have modifications to it by placing objects in between or on the strings to create a specific desired sound instructed by the composer. This technique was first introduced by John Cage at the beginning of the 1940s and later adopted by other composers in Europe and the USA. In the particular case of Tabula Rasa, you will be able to hear sounds of bells or gong-like sounds that are actually produced by this prepared piano. He achieves this effect by using amplification and inserting metal screws, giving the performer instructions that are very specific on where to place the screws and amplification. And don't worry, this shouldn't damage the piano at all. This central work introduces the expressive possibilities of a new style of composition he called tintinnabulation, a style that was influenced by studies of plainsong and early music and Steve Reich's minimalistic style. Tintinnabulation is a technique that unites two lines of musical structure, melody and triad, into one inseparable ensemble. The word comes from tintinnabulum, the Latin word for bell. Part spoke of this technique as a way to build from the most primitive materials, to be alone with silence and search for answers and unity. I know that all of this in theory sounds very elaborate, but know that once you hear this piece, all of this will come together and make sense to you as a listener. The title of the piece, Tabula Rasa, comes from ancient philosophy that can be translated as blank slate and can be associated with the Aristotelian notion of the human soul being born into the world as pure and empty of experiences and ideas, but at the same time with the potential of those ideas and experiences. The work consists of two large movements that contrast with each other in terms of speed and mood. The first movement, ludus, game, consists of 8 variations and a cadenza. The two violins begin playing softly and are interrupted with silences increasing in volume and rhythmic activity until they reach a cadenza played with arpeggios in the violins and prepared piano. Silentium, silence, really showcases his compositional technique of tintinnabulation, where we hear triadics played over scales in the bass, but moving at different rhythmic speeds. This movement requires the musicians to focus and find colors in their instruments and playing. At the end, the instruments gradually drop out as the music disappears into the depths of sound. Contrasting to the sounds and pieces we heard in the first half, the concert will close with an expansive symphony in the vein of the late Romantic period, Rachmaninoff's heartfelt and emotional Symphony No. 2. The very existence of the Second Symphony is a testament of Rachmaninoff's creative spirit after his first symphony depression, where he hardly composed for 3 years following the failure of his first symphony, and it took him 12 years before he completed his next symphony, written between 1906 and 1907 before leaving Russia. This symphony is a large-scale work with a performance time of about 60 minutes, where the composer really develops the symphonic form confidently with melodies that proclaim warm and romantic feelings. As a composer, he was completely unmoved by the modernist musical experiments of the early 20th century, clinging instead to the opulent and lyrical romanticism of the 19th century. This truly pleased his audience, but faced criticism from historians who were not interested in echoes of the past era. It was not until the composer's death that his reputation rose to match his contemporaries. This work points towards a mature Rachmaninoff, where we find flourishing melodies and brilliant drive within the orchestral texture and rich sonorities. Possibly inspired by his predecessor Tchaikovsky, a composer who he admired deeply, Rachmaninoff unifies the 4 movements of this symphony by recycling the principal themes and motifs, a technique Tchaikovsky uses as well in his 4th and 5th symphonies. In the first movement, the motto theme of the symphony is introduced by the low strings and then developed by the violins in an introduction that is 68 measures long. The first motif sounds like this. After an English horn solo, the movement gets underway into an allegro with a principal theme that looks back to the introduction. This is followed by a relaxed and expressive second theme that provides contrast before we reach the development with solos from the violin and clarinet. This section builds a new dramatic climax that relaxes again with the arrival of the recapitulation. Rachmaninoff reverses the classical order of a symphony's interior movements by putting the scherzo before the slow movement, a practice that had been done before and that doesn't really break any rules. In this scherzo, the composer can't resist inserting a lyrical, nostalgic secondary theme, which shares some characteristics from the opening movement's main theme. A fugue-like trio section in the middle of the movement morphs into a march before the two opening melodies return to complete the symmetrical form. The third movement contains some of the most beautiful music Rachmaninoff ever wrote that connotes the lyricism of vocal music. The violin's opening theme, which returns throughout the movements and in the finale as well, serves as an introduction to give way to the main melody being played by the clarinet. A pause after the development section creates a sense of expectancy before the woodwinds bring back the main theme in the recapitulation. The last movement has an exuberant opening, which suggests a vigorous, triumphant finale. The composer restates fragments of melodies from previous movements with a not so always optimistic sound, with quotations from the slow movement. The movement's strength lies in its energy, with march-like and dance-like characters, and a passage that simulates the magnificent clamor of bells. In conclusion, the arching melodies combined with the energetic figures lead to an emphatic and exultant finish. Thank you for joining me in this examination of the works you'll hear on this weekend's program. We hope to see you in the concert hall.